around couple years back, and I was in the second year of my college when I was watching it in the classroom. So one of my professors, he asked me, what are you watching? And I told him, sir, it's TEDx videos. And then he didn't hear the word TED. So you know the rest. Right? So it is interesting to have addressed a couple TEDx platforms. And this year in particular, I was very happy that something very unique happened. India had the presidency of the G20 summit. And we had the recently held G20 Leaders Summit on the 10th of September, 9th and 10th of September. One of the areas why I wanted to do this was to dispel a lot of myths around how multilateral diplomacy, bilateral diplomacy, and diplomacy in general is evolving. So right now in the world, we have a lot of chaos going on. There were two names that used to come up, and they were USA and erstwhile USSR, right? The two competing for sending the first man on moon, the two competing for a larger nuclear arsenal, the Cuban Missile Crisis, all of that. That happened because these countries were trying to become superpowers based on their nuclear arsenal. India, my friends, has never done that. We don't want to become a dominant superpower because of our nuclear arsenal. We have always given to the world. We have always believed in giving to the world. And this despite having been suppressed for over 1,000 years. When on the 15th of August, Jawaharlal Nehru gave that famous speech at the stroke of the midnight hour, he used a line, "The soul of a nation long suppressed one finds utterance." And that was exactly what had happened to India. Imagine a country that was subdued by foreign forces, invading forces. They say the last Hindu head of state of India was Prithviraj Chauhan around 900 AD, and then right after that, it was Dr. Rajendra Prasad, who, my friends, was the first president of India. So, you can imagine, for around 1,000 years, we were being controlled by foreign forces from the Delhi Sultanate, the Lodis, the Tughlaqs, the Khiljis, the slave dynasty, all of that. From there came the Mughals, and from the Mughals, all the three battles of Panipat happened. Eventually, 1757, Robert Clive, the great Battle of Plassey happens. And that's when the Brits enter India. And from there, 190 years of torturing, maiming, and looting and plundering the entire country, the entire subcontinent. And still, India is standing here today. And that is the beauty of Indian diplomacy. So thereafter, I believe that this conversation was very important. This particular TED Talk has no political bias. I'm not talking about what political party is thinking about changing the face of India. This is about Indian diplomacy, and a man at the helm of it, S. Jaishankar, a former diplomat himself, now as the External Affairs Minister of India. He's changing the rhetoric. He's changing the way India is being looked upon in global platforms. I've myself represented India in a lot of global platforms. I can tell you from first-hand experience that India is being appreciated, looked upon in a way that was not the case 10, 20, 50 years from now. Behind. So I think we are changing this dialogue of diplomacy. So this new world order that is emerging, the Modi S. Jaishankar doctrine of diplomacy, we are making the world hear, and we are giving to the world. There was a phrase that got attached to the brand India. It was voice of the global south. So the global south refers to the entire Southern Hemisphere. Now most of you all will agree, whenever you think of the Southern Hemisphere, there are two large land masses you see. That includes the African Union and the South American continent, both of which are filled with underdeveloped or developing nations. The same goes for a large part of the nations here in Southeast Asia, which are part of ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, SAARC, and BIMSTEC, Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical Cooperation. All of these nations are largely underdeveloped or developing. With the exception of Singapore, Malaysia, Australia, and New Zealand, the large part of global south that includes over 70-80 nations were underrepresented on global platforms. And that is where India has become a voice for that. Our theme was Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, right? One earth, one family, one future. And we showcased that in the most spectacular way possible. During the G20 summit and in general, during our presidency. Even though it was a rotational presidency, there wasn't a merit, but we brought the element of merit into it. So India is changing the world order today. inclusion of the African Union into the G20, thereafter making it G21, was one such move in this direction. So, and this world order, I believe, has not just come from diplomacy. It has come from several departments, including the tech industry, of which I was a part of at one point. And I believe this changing paradigm shift, you all also need to be a part of. It's called the Indian dream. Just like a couple of years back, they used to call it the American dream. Or getting a job in the US, doing your MS, getting your green card, settling down, owning one of those houses they show in movies like Conjuring, having a driveway and having a car parked outside. All of those were the American dream. And today that is changing. The Indian dream, it's the brand India or the Indian factory that you should be a part of, because that is changing the way the world is. The Russia-Ukraine crisis is a prime example of things that go wrong in world diplomacy. The Hamas-Israel issue, all of these. So the entire world is currently facing such a crisis. And India is trying to solve for them. India is trying to provide for them. One of the most non-controversial nations in the world, a world that has only given back, and a country that has only believed in getting people together and solving their problems. That is the Indian model of diplomacy. And that representation we are also demanding at the UN Security Council. You all know, मुझसे हिंदी में बोलने के लिए कहा गया एक बार, so मुझे याद करना पड़ा, संयुक्त राष्ट्र का सुरक्षा परिषद की स्थायी सदस्यता. That is what the permanent seat of the Security Council at the UN stands for. There are P5 nations: USA, UK, France, Russia, and China. Question yourself today, after this TED talk, the world's biggest defense manufacturers have been given the stakeholding of the UN Security Council. Will such countries want everlasting peace? Those who sell and fund the entire war game in the world. There is a small display section at the UN headquarters in New York that shows the daily military expenditure. It's a very famous one. It keeps on changing. Currently, it is at $33,000 trillion, the daily military expenditure of the world. Imagine what if this money was being used for development. That is where the Security Council is failing. The UN model of diplomacy is failing because it lacks representation, and India is changing it. India is challenging the status quo. That is needed in the current world order. That is where you all should be part of the Indian dream. From settling in India, to working in India, to being part of the startup growth story, to being part of the civil services. This is where you can make a difference, because there is no kind of success that helps you grow as much as you can in your home country. And in India, you can work at scale here. One of the reasons why all these Bollywood stars are so successful is because they get to work at scale. There is a concept called economies of scale. And there is a reason why we are able to do so. One of the agendas of G20 was also about tech diplomacy. There's a Sundar Pichai at Google, a Satya Nadella at Microsoft, a Shiv Nadar at HCL, a V. Narasimhan at Novartis, a Lakshman Narasimhan at Starbucks, Rajiv Suri, sir just mentioned this morning, at Nokia, Arvind Krishnan at IBM, Shantanu Narayan at Adobe, Ajay Banga at World Bank, and also the former managing director of World Bank, Anshula Kant, was the former managing director of State Bank of India. There is a reason why there is an Indian at every top spot around the world today. And that is because of the core competency, the conceptual clarity, the technical expertise that the Indian education system imparts. And that, my friends, is incredible. When Larry and Sergey, they formed Alphabet out of Google, right? So Google today is a mixture of several companies that come under the umbrella of Alphabet. So there's California Life Company, there's X Labs, there's Nest Fiber Venture Capital, Google, the parent company, and a lot of other, Sidewalk Labs, all of these. So when Larry and Sergey made the company known as Alphabet, they wrote a founder's letter on abc.xyz. Go and read it. They wrote, why we think Sundar is the right candidate is because he has an encyclopedic knowledge of every Google product or service we have ever built. And that is why we think he is the right candidate to take us forward. And that is the beauty of the Indian education system. We learn so much compared to our so-called developed country counterparts. So I was mentioning about calculus. All of these things, I don't think anyone has learned calculus apart from Isaac Newton and the students who prepare for JEE. So I think we have done a great job at that. right? I mean, every year then when there's these Olympics that happen every 4 years, the US media will criticize. Our belief system, value system is often being dominated by the Western media. When we didn't win a gold medal at the Olympics, they'll say a country of 1.25 billion at the Rio Olympics and still cannot make a gold medal. When we won one gold medal, care of Neeraj Chopra at the Tokyo Olympics, they said country of 1.40 billion and still just one gold medal. We have always been dominated. Nobody highlights the fact that every year at the Indian Physics Olympiad, Bio Olympiad, Maths Olympiad, Chemistry Olympiad, there has been an Indian kid who's been winning a gold medal for the last 5,000 years. But the Western media won't highlight that. The national spell bee that happens. You've heard of it, right? US wins. Every year there's a 7 or 8-year-old Indian kid who wins, defeating 20-year-old Americans with spellings that they have never heard of, in a language they invented. And that's the power of the Indian brain. Our core competency are our grey cells. And that is why there is an Indian at every top spot, my friends, including a little concept called vaccine diplomacy. We provided the most number of vaccines to the entire global south, which was entirely dependent upon India to be able to vaccinate their people. The entire thing, we are called pharmacy of the world. Remdesivir and tocilizumab, the two medicines you might have heard of during the COVID crisis. India provided to the world. We are called the pharmacy of the world. We have always known, from Mahatma Gandhi to Gautam Buddha, that peace is the solution. Things that the UN and all of these multilateral organizations keep reiterating all the time. But India has always known it, my friends. We are often called as the CTO of the world, the Chief Technology Officer of the world. Our technologies, the UPI, all of these foreign diplomats, when they visit Delhi and they are taken on a tour and then they have to pay a vegetable vendor, they are surprised. So you can directly send money to a vegetable vendor's bank account. You can't do that in the US today. You can't do that in all of these so-called developed countries. The CoWIN platform, we completely digitized it. S. Jaishankar in an interview, he said with his son, he was in the US, and when he had to show his vaccine card, he brought out this entire folded paper and showed it to the person. And S. Jaishankar just had it on his mobile phone. That's the Indian difference. All of these platforms, from DigiLocker to CoWIN to UPI, they are all open source. We have provided them for the world. The world, all of these developing countries used CoWIN, the platform, to vaccinate their people. So India has, in a way, changed the entire discussion here. We are the power horse of a space industry. ISRO, probably the most jugadu space organization you will ever come across. And PSLV. You know, they always say PSLV C-29, C-37, C-42, C-65. Power horse of a rocket. Elon Musk and his Falcon engine cannot do what the PSLV has done. For the last 17 missions, that same rocket has been going up, getting jettisoned, launching satellites into orbit, the payload into the orbit, and coming back and falling down. So you heard those things, right? Launching 104 satellites in one single mission. So a lot of these things. And we have had leaders like Dr. APJ, people who have guided the world, not just through thought leadership, but with so much from leading the country on a scientific level to understanding the soul of India. So there are always possibilities like this that you can look forward to. The historical narrative, you all know this guy, right? At 23 years of age, on 23rd March 1931, Bhagat Singh kissed the gallows. And the sad part here is, not a lot of people remember his contribution to building India. He was probably one of the first thought leaders. इस कदर वाकिफ है मेरी कलम मेरे जज्बातों से, मैं इश्क भी लिखना चाहूं तो इनकलाब लिखना चाहता है. At 22 years of age, can write such a thing. From theosophy to religion to anarchism to Marxism to capitalism to technology to innovation, entrepreneurship, building Hindustan Socialist Republican Organization, teamwork, to scaling it up, to challenging the might of an empire, to actually telling the Brits that this is our land. So much that his case was being held at the Privy Council in London, the highest court of the land. This man, Srinivas Ramanujan, during the First World War, when India was being heavily subjugated by the British, Ramanujan had the courage to write a letter to a man called G.H. Hardy with his mathematical documents. And you know what? G.H. Hardy called him over to Cambridge. At a time when India was being subjugated by the Brits, they had to acknowledge the brilliance of yet another Indian mind. This lady has never been represented on any government platform. You know who she is? Durga Bhabi, the great revolutionary of HSRA. And this lady on the side is also Durga Bhabi. A lot of people just know Durga Bhabi that she was a female revolutionary. The only female revolutionary in the annals of world revolutionary history, my friends. And nobody knows what happened to her after that. She lived until 1999 in Ghaziabad, and not a lot of people know of her. She is Homi Bhabha, the man who was about to give India its first atomic bomb in the 1960s. Probably Vikram Sarabhai, the man who gave India ISRO, India's space program. All of these people have challenged the status quo time and again on a global platform. And this guy, Nandan Nilekani, scaled up Infosys, made it the world leader that it is today, came over to UIDAI, Unique Identification Authority of India, built Aadhaar, the world's most complex ID generation system ever possible, and then went over to NCPI and built UPI, the world's most sophisticated bank-to-bank transfer mechanism that exists. All of this has been done by an Indian. The next changing world order, the next changing voice of the global south, how India is redefining expectations, redefining possibilities, and making the world a more peaceful, a more knowledgeable, a more resourceful, and a more wealthier, not in terms of economy, but in the ways that India has given to the world. And that is India's true observation of the G20. That is where you all can be a part of this growth story. The one great thing G20 did was Jan Bhagidari. Everyone got to know. Even my auto driver in Delhi knew what G20 is when I was taking it to Pragati Maidan. But no one knew what goes on in the background, in the workings of the G20. So with that, I rest my case, and I thank you all for inviting me. My final words this afternoon are again, take me back to the Bhagat Singh era. अब भी जिसका खून ना खौला खून नहीं वो पानी है जो देश के काम ना आए वो बेकार जवानी है. Thank you.